Welcome to our KNX Top Tip series. In this series, we're going to talk through the different parameters and ways that you can configure our KNX TAP-5 coupler. The KNX TAP-5 coupler can be used with both our premium or metal front plates or our alpha plastic or metallic front plates. The configuration that we'll go through today is relevant to both design lines. So let's jump in. So the first thing you'll notice in ETS in the general menu is there isn't many parameters visible to start with. So the first thing we have to do is select an operating mode. In this first video, we're going to go through a setup called Smart Scene Plate. This is a pre-configured layout of the keypad that we think is the most optimal use of the keypad. You can, of course, configure each of the 5 buttons independently, at which point you would click 5 independent buttons, but we'll cover this in a separate video. Let's jump into Smart Scene Plate and start configuring. So the first thing you'll notice is on the left-hand side here, a Smart Scene Plate tab comes up. So if we jump into the Smart Scene Plate, right. To start with, I'd like to explain the concept of Smart Scene Plate. The concept is basically when you walk into the room, the middle button toggles the room on and off. Nice and simple. When the room turns on, by default, it will turn on to the last selected scene. The keypad has 4 status LED or feedback LEDs around on each corner of the keypad. So when we press the middle button, one of those corners, the last selected scene, will turn on, and by default, it will turn on to be magenta. The halo around the whole entire keypad tells the user whether the room is either on or off. So there's a clear visual indication whether the room is on or off, as well as what the selected scene is. When the user leaves the room, they press the middle button again, and the room turns off. They can alternatively press the selected scene. That will also turn the room off. Or if they want to change the scene, they simply select one of the other scenes on the other 4 or other 3 corners of the keypad. So let's have a look at the parameters and how we go about actually setting this up and commissioning it in ETS. So the corner button layout, we're going to leave as 4 scene buttons. You can alternatively have some blinds on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, but for this basic setup, we're going to leave it at the default. The center button activates parameter does exactly that. It tells you what happens when you press the center button. You can either select the last selected scene, which is the default, or if you'd like to select a specific scene all the time, then you can choose the corner of the keypad that gets selected when the middle button is pressed. So it's effectively the default on scene when you walk into a room and press the middle button. Then we've got some settings on the status halo light, so the default brightness, and then we've got 2 colors. So maybe just to explain that a little bit, why have we got 2 colors? So the color here, white, that's the color that the entirety of the keypad will when the room turns on, the entirety of the keypad around the edge on the halo will light up white, and then the selected scene will be shown in magenta. You can, of course, change these by dropping them down. You can also have a different color per corner if you wish, and you can also, there's the default colors which are here, but you can also set up custom colors, which is done in the general advanced menu, which is here. But for now, we're just going to leave that as the default, which is magenta. Right. How do we actually activate the scenes? The default option for activating scenes is to use a scene object. So the Smart Scene Plate functionality has one single group object for scene activation, which is group object 19, which is the Smart Scene Plate call up and save scene output. So there's a single 1-byte output for the entirety of the keypad for all of the buttons. The The only thing we have to define is what are the scene numbers for the 4 corner scenes. So by default, they are scenes 1, 2, 3, and 4. In its default configuration, the smart scene plate also uses scenes to turn the room off. You can alternatively use a 1-bit 0 to turn the room off, and we'll look at that in another video. But the default is to use scenes to turn the room off. Action on long press and enable motion sensor blocking are other more advanced features that we'll cover in a separate video. To be able to configure Smart Scene Plate, the minimum that you have to do is specify the 4 different on scenes, specify the off scene, and connect your Smart Scene Plate 1-byte output to your dimmer or whatever dimmer actuator or whatever device you're using to manage the scenes within your project. There's one more step that we have to do, and that is to ensure that we maintain the toggle state of the middle button. Because if your property is turned off using another KNX device, maybe an all house off button by the bed, for example, we need to make sure that the keypad is aware of that, so it can, one, update the toggle status of the middle button, but also turn off all the feedback LEDs. And for that, we've implemented feedback objects. So these are 1-byte objects that can be connected to all of the channels of lighting control that exist in any of the scenes that are activated by this button. And the keypad will monitor all of those feedback objects. And if they're all 0, i.e. every single light is off, then the button will, all the feedback LEDs will turn off, and the middle toggle state will be toggled so that the next time you press it, it will send an on scene. You can change the number of feedback objects. By default, there are 2, but you can increase that to 16 if desired. And you will see them here, feedback channel 1, channel 2. And that's it. That's how you go about configuring our Smart Scene Plate functionality for its default configuration. Got any questions? Please let us know.